ever stop to think about who's actually building real wealth in America? Forget the instant millionaires you might see online. What if the truly financially secure folks are, well, maybe your neighbors? People leading surprisingly low-key lives.
That's really the heart of it, isn't it? So the core question explored in the Millionaire Next Door, and it's based on some uh, really extensive research that kind of challenges so many of our assumptions about what it means to be wealthy.
Exactly. This isn't just like a gut feeling. The authors, they were academics, and they spent years surveying and interviewing people who'd become millionaires pretty much through their own efforts.
Right, the first generation in their families to reach that level of financial independence.
Yeah. And they didn't just talk to them. They even spoke with the professionals who advised them, their CPAs and people like that, to really understand the strategies from, well, all
And
angles.
the amazing thing really is the consistent patterns they found. It wasn't about luck or, getting a big inheritance for most of them.
Not the usual story, then.
Not at all. It really came down to a specific set of behaviors and a very particular way of thinking about money.
Okay, so for this deep dive, our goal is basically to pull out those key strategies, right? The practical stuff, the insights that, you listening can start thinking about and maybe even applying in your own life, no matter where you are right now.
Exactly. And we want to bring a really positive outlook here, building financial security. It's absolutely possible, even today, with all the changes, new opportunities, things like crypto popping up.
For sure. So, okay, let's dive in. What were some of these common traits these millionaires shared, the surprising ones?
Well, the book highlights 7 key things, these common denominators. One that really stood out to me was that many were business owners.
Oh, interesting. Like tech startups?
Not necessarily.
Mm.
Often in businesses you might see every day. Think like a local manufacturing plant or a small chain of stores, maybe a service company, and they tended to be, long-term residents, living in the same town for ages.
Okay, that paints a very different picture than the overnight tech billionaire. Sounds more like building something solid, sustainable.
It really is. What else? Well, they also found these folks were very likely to be married, and usually married just once and stayed married.
Huh. Stability there, too.
Yeah, and they typically lived in neighborhoods where their own net worth was actually higher than that of their neighbors.
So, not necessarily in the flashiest, most expensive areas.
Not always, no. And maybe the most crucial part, they were diligent savers and investors.
Mm-hmm.
Almost, you could say, compulsive about it.
Diligent saving and investing. Okay, that sounds like the real bedrock of their success. And you mentioned most were first-gen rich.
That's right. About 80% were the first in their families to become millionaires. Their entire lifestyle, it seemed, was just geared towards accumulating assets, building wealth, not just showing it off.
Right.
And their spouses often played a really critical role. Planners, meticulous budgeters.
So, a team effort often. And a very different approach to spending than maybe we'd expect. This is where it gets really interesting for me. This idea of living below your means. Let's dig into that. What did the book say?
Oh, this was quite revealing. The typical millionaire wasn't chasing the latest trends or, driving super flashy cars.
No fancy imports.
Not usually. Yeah. They often wore relatively inexpensive clothing like suits and drove American-made cars.
Yeah.
Often not even the newest models. And leasing. Almost never.
Wow, that's almost the opposite of what we see pushed on us every day. The message is usually about projecting success through what you own, what you drive.
Exactly. And the book draws this really compelling contrast. You have high-income earners who spend a lot, conspicuous consumption, but don't actually build much wealth.
Right.
And then you have those who do build wealth. They give this example, Dr. Ashton. Earned a lot, big income.
Right.
But high spending meant his net worth wasn't really growing that much.
Yeah.
Versus Mr. Bobbins, a fireman. Much lower income, obviously. But he'd accumulated significantly more wealth. Why? Just by being frugal.
Just frugal. So it really highlights that it's not just about the paycheck coming in.
Not at all. It's about how much you actually keep and, crucially, how much you grow. And that's something anyone, really, at any income level, can start thinking about right now.
Absolutely. And this ties right into the power of frugality, doesn't it? It's not about being miserable or depriving yourself. It's about making conscious choices.
Precisely. The book defines frugality as basically being efficient with your resources, economy and use. And they position this as a cornerstone, a fundamental pillar of building wealth. It's the total opposite of just, wasteful hyperconsumption, buying stuff without thinking.
And their actual spending habits were kind of surprising. I remember reading about the suits.
Yes. That detail. The research showed the vast majority, the huge majority of these millionaires had never spent more than, what was it, $399 on their most expensive suit.
$399.
Yeah. Only a tiny fraction ever went over $1,000. It just really underscores this idea of making deliberate choices. Where does your money go? Focusing on quality, maybe, and value, not just the brand name or the status symbol.
Yeah, it makes you think. We could all probably look at our own spending, right? Are there areas where maybe we could be a bit more conscious about value versus just impulse?
Definitely. So, okay, if they're not motivated by the status, the expensive things, what are the rewards they are seeking? What's driving them?
Good question.
The book really emphasizes that for these individuals, the main rewards were intangible. Things like financial independence.
Freedom.
Exactly. Freedom. The peace of mind knowing they could provide for their families. Security for the future. Material stuff was, well, secondary to that feeling of control and well-being. Imagine that feeling, Financial freedom.
Yeah.
That's the driver.
That really reframes what success means, doesn't it? Less about the shiny objects, more about the security you've actually built underneath. Okay, so how did they get that control? Planning and budgeting must be huge here.
Oh, absolutely crucial. The book found a really stark difference here. You look at millionaires versus people with high incomes but lower net worth.
Okay.
The vast majority of millionaires, they knew. They knew exactly how much their household spent each year on the big things: food, housing, clothes.
They tracked it.
Seems like it. In contrast, only a small percentage of the high-income, lower net worth group had that level of awareness. They just didn't really know.
Wow. That's a real wake-up call right there. Do you, listening right now, have a clear picture of your own annual spending? That seems like such a powerful first step.
It really is. If you don't know where the money's going, well, it's like trying to steer a ship without a map or a rudder,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
They give this great example. Mrs. Rule. She was a millionaire auctioneer. Her average income, relatively modest, around $90,000 a year.
Okay. Good income, but maybe not what you'd first think for a millionaire.
Right. But her net worth, over $2 million. And her secret, just meticulous planning and budgeting, everything focused on her goal.
Yeah.
A financially secure, worry-free retirement. She knew where her money was going, and she made choices to align that spending with her big picture.
A clear goal and a plan to get there. That sounds incredibly motivating. What about the contrast? They mentioned a couple, Robert and Judy.
Ah, yes, Robert and Judy. They earned over $200,000 a year. So more than double Mrs. Rule's income.
Okay, big earners.
But significantly less wealth. Why? A lack of spending discipline. And, get this, a reliance on numerous credit cards. They had 14.
14 credit cards. Wow.
Yeah, it just shows how easily even a really high income can be, well, undermined by uncontrolled spending. It's a powerful reminder. Income alone doesn't guarantee wealth. Not even close.
14 cards. That sounds like a recipe for debt disaster. And what kind of plastic do the actual millionaires tend to carry? Was it all fancy platinum cards?
Interestingly, no. They found that everyday cards, your standard Visa, MasterCard, even store cards like Sears, were actually much more common among these millionaires.
Really?
Yeah, more common than the premium stuff like American Express Platinum or Diners Club or those high-end department store cards. Again, it just points to a very practical, almost utilitarian approach to their finances, not driven by status or perceived perks.
Okay, so clear takeaways there. Avoid excessive credit, manage spending actively. Now, the wing also talks about something called economic outpatient care, EOC. That sounds clinical. What is it?
Yeah, is a term they coined. It refers to substantial financial gifts, money, assets, that sort of thing, that affluent parents give to their adult children or maybe grandchildren.
Okay, helping out the kids financially. Sounds like a nice thing to do.
Well, it might seem like a loving, supportive gesture, and often the intention is good, but the book argues it can sometimes have these unintended negative consequences. It can actually hurt the recipient's ability to become financially independent themselves.
How so? I think most people assume giving your kids money is always helpful.
The authors observed that this EOC, while well-intentioned, can inadvertently create a sense of entitlement. It can lessen the motivation for the kids to build their own financial success. They call it the montage effect.
The montage effect.
Yeah, where the recipients start to see their parents' wealth as just an extension of their own income. Something to be spent, basically.
I see. So it's about potentially hindering that drive, that long-term self-sufficiency.
Exactly. They give examples, like Mary and Lamar, a couple living this lavish lifestyle. But it was largely supported by Mary's mother. Contrast that with, say, a sales executive in the study who was entirely self-reliant.
Okay.
And the data, it backed this up. It showed that adults receiving substantial financial gifts often ended up with lower net worth and lower income compared to their peers in the same jobs who didn't get that kind of support.
Wow, that's counterintuitive. So just handing over cash isn't always the best way to support your kids financially in the long run?
Seems not. The book really advocates for teaching them how to fish, as the saying goes.
Right.
So, things like investing in their education, maybe supporting business ventures, but with some expectation of ownership or equity. Things that build lasting skills, independence, financial literacy. Rather than just enabling consumption, think about passing on financial know-how, not just a handout.
That makes a lot of sense, and it really ties into that whole theme of self-reliance, which brings us to the entrepreneurial spirit they saw in a lot of these millionaires.
Yes, exactly. A significant chunk, a really notable percentage of the millionaires in their study were self-employed.
Their own boss.
Right, which gave them more direct control over their financial outcomes, their destiny, you could say. And they identified these key characteristics of the successful ones. Thriftiness, discipline, definitely a tendency towards lower consumption.
The frugality again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Plus a willingness to take calculated risks and just a really strong work ethic. And, these are traits anyone can cultivate, really, no matter what your career path is.
Those sound like the classic ingredients for building something yourself from the ground up.
Totally. They contrasted this guy, Victor, a frugal immigrant entrepreneur who built a successful business from scratch. His kids, though, they were described as Americanized, high-consuming, and they were under-accumulators of wealth, not following his financial footsteps.
Those habits can get lost.
They can. It's also really interesting that a significant portion of top business entrepreneurs are first-generation Americans. It just highlights the opportunities out there still for people willing to take initiative, work hard, and build something in today's economy.
Yeah, that's encouraging. And they shared Laura's story, too, someone who found success almost out of desperation.
Yeah, Laura's story was powerful. She became really successful in real estate sales basically after realizing she had no other viable options. She had to succeed. It just underscores that potent mix of drive, resourcefulness, and maybe that fire in the belly when your back's against the wall. Necessity can be a huge motivator.
Definitely. Okay, so when it came to actually managing the money they were accumulating, were these millionaires just winging it, figuring it out as they went?
Not usually, no. They often develop these long-term relationships with trusted professionals. CPAs, attorneys, people they could rely on for expert advice on investment strategies, estate planning, tax stuff.
Smart. Getting expert help.
It really emphasizes the value of having knowledgeable support, especially as things get more complex financially. You don't have to know everything yourself.
Makes sense. Having good guidance seems invaluable, especially as your wealth grows. But how
Right.
did they pick these advisors?
Well, they were careful about it. The book shares this one strategy from a Mr. Martin. He actually looked into the personal investment success of potential advisors before hiring them.
Oh, interesting. Checking their own track record.
Exactly. Others, like a Dr. North mentioned in the book, took a more hands-on approach. He was basically his own financial advisor, focused on long-term growth, keeping fees low. So it's about being proactive, informed, and really taking ownership of your financial decisions, whether you get help or DIY it.
Taking ownership. Yeah, that's a recurring theme, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really powerful. And didn't they mention a specific savings target, too? Like a percentage?
Yes, they did. Mr. Gifford's 15% method, it's pretty straightforward. The principle of consistently saving and investing at least 15% of your pre-tax income.
15% pre-tax.
Yeah. It's a tangible goal, actionable, something anyone can really aim for, regardless of their current income. Maybe think about what percentage you're saving right now. Could you maybe nudge it up a bit towards that 15%?
It gives you a concrete number to shoot for. So it's not just about cutting spending, but actively, consistently funneling money towards building future wealth. Okay, now the book also makes this really important distinction between income and net worth. Why is that such a big deal?
This is fundamental. It's a huge shift in how these millionaires actually define financial success. They focus on net worth,
Right.
basically the total value of everything you own your assets minus everything you owe your liabilities. That number, your net worth, is the real measure, not just your annual paycheck.
Why is looking at it that way so important?
Well, because high-income earners, people making a lot each year, can sometimes end up paying a larger percentage of their wealth equivalent in income tax compared to those who've already built up significant assets.
Say more about that. Wealth equivalent.
Yeah, think of it like this. The book gives an example. Sharon has a high income, but her net worth isn't that high relative to it. Barbara has a similar high income, but her net worth is much, much greater.
Okay.
Sharon, because more of her wealth is coming in as taxable income each year, might see a larger slice of her overall financial potential going straight to taxes, compared to Barbara, whose wealth is already sitting in assets, maybe growing more tax efficiently.
Got it. So the focus really shifts. It's not just about the money flowing in, it's about how much wealth you're actually building and keeping. That's a powerful mindset change.
Absolutely. And thinking about the future economy, the book also touched on opportunities for people looking to provide services to the affluent. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. They pointed out that the number of millionaire households is actually growing faster than the general population. So there's this increasing demand for specialized services that cater to their specific needs, which could be a big opportunity for entrepreneurs, maybe people thinking about careers.
Definitely. They mentioned specific areas, things like accounting, but with a real focus on complex tax planning, estate planning, trust management, also estate law, especially helping widows or widowers manage inheritances.
What else?
The real estate management, private school educators, philanthropic advising, helping wealthy families manage their charitable giving, even high-end travel planning for affluent families.
Interesting niches.
And the key insight they shared was that affluent folks are often less sensitive to price when they're buying services that genuinely help them manage their wealth effectively, control spending, navigate complex legal or financial waters, or, enhance their family's well-being and education. Value or price for the right expertise.
That's definitely food for thought for anyone looking at future business ventures or career paths. Okay, so let's try to wrap this all up. To bring it all together, what are the most crucial, actionable lessons from The Millionaire Next Door? The things our listeners can start thinking about, maybe implementing today, to move towards their own financial goals, especially considering today's economy, maybe even thinking about new things like crypto.
The core principles are remarkably consistent. They feel timeless, really, and very relevant now. First and foremost, live consistently below your means. That's the absolute foundation.
Spend less than you earn. Seems simple, but hard to do sometimes.
It is, but crucial. Second, make saving and investing a priority. Start early. Even small amounts consistently invested can grow massively over time. Compounding is your friend.
Right, the earlier the better.
Third, have a plan and a budget. Know where your money is actually going. You need that information to make conscious choices.
Track it. Got it.
Fourth, be frugal. Be mindful in your consumption. Focus on value, on long-term utility, not just status or trends. Ask yourself, do I really need this?
Conscious spending.
Fifth, if it aligns with your skills and you're okay with the risk, seriously consider entrepreneurship. Self-employment offers more control over your financial future.
Build your own thing.
Sixth, don't be afraid to seek trusted financial advice when you need it. But also, take the time to educate yourself. Understand your investments, understand your decisions, be engaged.
Be proactive, yeah.
Seventh, shift your focus. Build net worth. Don't just chase higher income. Assets are key. And finally, if you have kids, instill those values. Financial independence, hard work. Teach them how to build their own future. Don't just rely on handouts. Many people have genuinely found these principles life-changing. It's like a roadmap to greater financial security, peace of mind.
That's powerful and incredibly encouraging, I think. It really drives home that building wealth, it's usually a marathon, right? Fueled by those consistent habits, that long-term view, not some quick sprint based on luck or just a big salary.
Exactly.
And that's a message that can really bring a lot of hope, I think, for financial peace for people of all ages, all backgrounds.
Absolutely. It boils
Right.
down to making conscious choices day in and day out, prioritizing your long-term financial well-being over that instant gratification urge we all feel sometimes. These principles, they work. They work in any economic environment, really.
So as you're listening to this, maybe just consider one small step, one significant thing you could take action on today. Maybe it is downloading a budgeting app, or setting up that automatic transfer to savings, or just deciding consciously to delay buying something non-essential you were thinking about.
Small step setup.
Reflect on these values, these habits we've talked about. Think about how you could start integrating them into your own life. Because ultimately, becoming your own version of the millionaire next door, achieving that sense of financial security, that independence, it really starts with those consistent, intentional actions day after day.